when you reach a place where more and more people are thinking things aren't getting better anymore, that creates this, when that awareness comes over you, it's very disruptive. And that's where paying attention to the nervous system becomes so important, because a lot of us have never once in our life had the feeling that we face problems bigger than we can solve, bigger than we know how to solve. We've had the sense that technology will solve it, AI will solve it, the government will solve it, and some people's religion, God will solve it. And yet when we start to think, hey, we've got some tough stuff to deal with. We're not going to get through this with life getting easier. We're going to have to go through some tough patches. Yeah, that's a new thing to get used to.
Welcome to the Fresh Start Family Show. I'm your host, Wendy Snyder, powerful parenting educator and family life coach. And together we are going on a journey to help you expand your heart, learn new tools, and strengthen your family so you can build the family legacy of your dreams. I'm a mama too turned child and family advocate who went from being extremely stressed out back when my strong-willed little girl was a toddler to now thriving as a parent and having the honor to support thousands of families each year who choose to go from frazzled and impatient to peaceful and empowered. Each week, we will dive in with experts, thought leaders, authors, and advocates with insights to help you thrive in your parenting walk, as well as in your marriage and even in your career and faith walk too. Together, sometimes alone, sometimes with my better half and co-host Terry, we'll explore the triumphs and trials we all face as parents and share practical tools to fill our hearts, minds, and souls with inspiration. Take a deep breath and get ready to be poured into with some fresh start inspiration. Let's do this. Hi, families. I'm so grateful that you are here today. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that it has been a very tough emotional week here in America. Like many of you, I have felt the heaviness of witnessing the rise of authoritarian leadership here in America, political violence, and now the looming threat of war, all on top of the everyday challenges of parenting and just trying to stay hopeful as summer arrives. And that is why I am so honored to welcome Brian McLaren to the show today. He is an author, speaker, activist, and public theologian who advocates for a new kind of Christianity, one that is generous and just and committed to the common good. He is the Dean of Faculty at the Center for Action and Contemplation. He's also the co-host of Learning How to See and Southern Lights, and the author of a million books, but Faith After Doubt, Do I Stay Christian, and now Life After Doom, Wisdom and Courage for a World Falling Apart. He's also the co-author of Corey and the Seventh Story and has a new book coming out in July too that you'll hear about. So in this timely conversation, we are diving into faith, fear, and the future, finding hope in troubled times, and how we as families can summon the courage to raise our voices and advocate for leadership in our nation that mirrors the firm, kind, dignified leadership we aim to model in our homes, which is the opposite of authoritarianism. So we also talk about the correlation between ecological overshoot, which is essentially the destruction of our planet, and authoritarianism and how they are connected. And I know that all may sound very intense and depressing, but I promise you it is not. This episode is filled with hope and inspiration. So if you are feeling stirred to take action or simply just want to stay encouraged, I do invite you to come over to Instagram. Make sure you're following me. I took a break for the last 6 months from that platform, but now I am back, and I have been sharing resources and reflections on the importance of standing tall for democracy, not authoritarian rule in this beautiful nation of America we all love so much. I, over there, am covering lots of different ways to make a difference right now, whether it's through organizations like 5calls.org or by simply having hard conversations with your neighbors or your in-laws and friends instead of being permissive and just brushing it under a rug, hoping it will go away. History sadly shows us that when we become silent, the problem does not go away. It gets worse. So whatever you do, no matter how small or big, thank you for contributing, because the truth is, in my opinion, democracy is not a spectator sport. We really need everyone off the sidelines and in the game in order for it to work. And to all of our international listeners, thank you for raising your voices also. To everyone that will listen, from, I don't know, the Pope to the leader of your nation, please write the emails or make the phone calls too, to express your love for us and your care, because your neighborly support means the world to us as we fight back during this really scary time in America. So thank you for being a loyal listener. And remember, we're also now on YouTube. So if you prefer a visual experience, maybe pull up this episode on your phone or your iPad while you're cooking dinner or something like that. But no matter how you're getting this encouragement today, we're just so happy that you're here. Please share this episode with a friend who could use encouragement. There's a lot of really discouraged people right now. And especially during this time of immense sorrow, fear, and heartbreak in our nation, your friends would love to hear from you. So we see you, we honor you, we are over here cheering you on. Without further ado, help me welcome Brian McLaren to the show and enjoy this episode. Well, hey there, families, and welcome to a new episode of the Fresh Start Family Show. We're so happy that you are here. Today, we are just thrilled and honored to have Brian McLaren on our show, who is the author of Life After Doom, Wisdom and Courage for a World Falling Apart, and a new book coming in July that we can't wait to hear more about. But welcome to the show, Brian. Thanks for being here.
So glad to be with you both.
Yeah, man, we've been looking forward to this interview for a while now. As we were just chatting about, we got to meet you when you spoke at our children's preschool. Our kids are now 14 and 17, and they went to preschool at this little school, and the United Methodist Church that is associated with that preschool is just such a special place. And to be in that same sanctuary where we watched many of our kids go through many Christmas pageants and just have very special moments for Easter and all the things was really incredible. And when we first saw you speak, Brian, what a wild moment, I should say. I think you hear this probably often about, especially your latest book. Today, we're going to be talking about faith, fear, and the future, finding hope in troubled times. But yeah, it was so much of what you speak about and what you write about in your latest book is a hard pill to swallow. Yeah. And at the same time, teaches us and helps us find hope and the ability to run our race as well, as I've heard you say, anchoring down in that hope and our faith that we believe so strongly in. But as we push record today, it is Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth.
Yes.
And it is a time where many Americans are really starting to flip the F out. I know you like to use curse words in the appropriate places, not everywhere, but I think it is.
This might be it.
It is rather appropriate right now. I think there's a lot of Americans where we're really seeing red, and to the point where our nervous systems are starting to. And I'm a nervous system teacher. I'm an emotional literacy teacher, and I'm even starting to have nightmares and really struggle. So what a perfect time to have you. I feel like God is just like, here you go. It's such a blessing to our community right now to have you just dropped into our world and to be able to bless our listeners today. So we're excited to dive in. So can we get started, Brian, with just telling us a little bit about how you got here? I know you've written, I think, is this your 17th book, Life After Doom?
It's just way too many, however many it is.
How would you wrap up your life? Like, how did you get here? How did you become the kind of Christian that I want to hang out with? The kind of Christian that is advocating for just a new way of Christianity, or for many of us, we kind of look at it as like the ancient way of Christianity. But how did you get here? How would you summarize it for us?
Well, I'll try to keep it very brief. And then you can ask me for further details on anything that would be of interest. But I was born in upstate New York and then spent most of my life in the D.C. area in Maryland. And I was born into a loving, kind, wonderful, fundamentalist family. We were a very strict form of Christians. My parents were less strict than their parents, and I think it often goes that way. So, when I say that my family was fundamentalist, they are not the kind of people to storm the Capitol or chant "Hang Mike Pence" in the name of Jesus or anything like that. They were. My dad was a medical doctor. anybody who was in pain, he wanted to help them, And my mom was one of the kindest people in the universe. So, but growing up in that background, I knew I was in trouble at a young age because I loved science. I was kind of a budding hippie. I'm totally bald now, but I had long hair and a beard then. And
amazing.
And I just knew that the way my life was going didn't fit with fundamentalism. And I remember being a young teenager thinking, well, 4 more years and I'll be out of here. And I knew it would break my parents' heart and cause a lot of trouble, but there was just no way I could see to be a Christian. I ended up having this very powerful spiritual experience. I won't go into the details, except that some friends who went to church invited me to go on a youth retreat with their church. Our church didn't have youth retreats. They weren't in the Bible, so we didn't have them. But these guys were liberal Southern Baptists, if irony intended. Nice. And so they invited me to their retreat. And I only said yes because there were 2 girls who were going who I really wanted to hang out with.
Smart.
And,
2 of them.
But on the Saturday night of the retreat, a couple of us snuck out of the retreat. And we actually weren't trying to cause any trouble. We just sat on this hillside and talked. And as we sat there, I had this kind of very profound spiritual experience. And from that point on, I knew that whatever God was love. And in some ways that became my new fundamental, like my only one fundamental, that whatever God is love. And so that really became my kind of, guiding star through the years to come. I became a college English teacher while I was teaching at a university near DC. Some friends of mine and I got together and we said, gosh, we really can't bring any of our friends to any church that we know about. We said, well, why don't we start a little faith community? And so we started this little experimental faith community. And I ended up leaving teaching and became the pastor of it some years later and did that for 24 years. During those years, I tried to grapple with what is the goodness that it's at the heart of the Christian faith and how could we focus on that and shed some of the ugly and problematic parts. And I started writing books. And since I left the pastorate after 24 years as a pastor, I've been a writer and speaker and activist. And in some ways, I feel like what has happened to me is that I've kept expanding my circle of concern. So first I cared about church and Christians. And then I started caring about human beings. And now I realize if you care about religion, you need a healthy human society. If you care about healthy human society, you need a healthy planet. So now it's sort of, I just see how it's all interrelated.
So beautiful. Well, how cool. I don't think I picked up that you're from Maryland or DC area. We're from Maryland, DC area. We've been in California for 30 years, but born and raised there, and kind of same story. A few years before we left, I left at 18. Terry was about 20. We were like, we need to get out of here. We need to go and create this kind of different type of life. So how cool. Yeah, I think so much of what you share, so many can relate to. And I think that's also been my journey. Our journey is that extension of who you are caring about is so beautiful, right? And such a great representation of what an evolving faith looks like in the name of Jesus. So I love that. So when it comes to your new book, Brian, there are different, I think you break it down into 3 or 4 different parts, right? And it's so funny because as I was reading it, it's like, I'm just dying to get to the hope part. Like, just tell us it's all going to be okay, Brian. Like, tell us everything's going to be all right. And like, there's just like, there's so much hope, I think, towards the end for sure. And we're going to get to that part. But would you break it down how you broke this book into sections to kind of walk us through it? And I will say before you go into that, I loved how you you write with such care for the reader to check in on us quite often and say, how you doing? This is a lot. Like, you could just watch, it to me as like a nervous system embodiment teacher, emotional literacy, we help parents really upgrade their family legacy, break painful generational cycles. A lot of parents who grew up in fundamental evangelical Christianity hurt and harmed their whole life, and now they don't want to repeat it. But really paying attention to the body and like, how am I reacting to this? is so beautiful. But will you share with
Sure.
us how you broke it down into these different sections?
Sure. Let me begin by saying I think in some ways the spark for this book, there were many different sparks, but one of the main sparks came, I was participating in a protest. I live in Southwest Florida, and our governor was planning to frack the Everglades. And we thought, oh my gosh, that's all we need. And so I was a group of several hundred people, and we had participated in this very fun and creative protest. And I'm marching along with a woman who I've met on many different protests, and that's an activist work. And I said, how are you doing? And she said, I have no hope. I don't think anything we're doing is going to make a difference. I think the rich people are so powerful, and they're going to do whatever they want to do to make their money, and the rest of us are going to have to suffer. And so we just sort of walked along, and I felt her pain. She's someone I've seen out there. And finally I said, well, you're here though. And she said, yeah, I guess I've given up hope, but I still have love, and I'm here to protect what I love. And I remember thinking at that moment, that is a deeper kind of hope than I've ever heard of. And it made me think of the verse, it's in the New Testament in the book of Romans, where Paul, who writes this letter, speaks of Abraham who had hope against hope. In other words, like his one kind of hope had crumbled, but there was another kind of hope that arose from the ruins. And that, I think, is what's happening to a lot of people. And I'll just add one thing to that. We all were born in an era of increasing prosperity. Just about everybody could be sure that they would do better than their parents. And that went on for a pretty long string of generations for a lot of people. Not for everybody. Lots of people were kept in conditions where they couldn't get ahead. They did not have equal opportunity. But for people, I would say, a cutoff, it's hard to make a single cutoff, but I'd say for people younger than 45 or so, they've grown up in a different world where they don't have the confidence that they'll do better than their parents. And the farther you go below 45, they face a world where they say, gosh, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to afford a house.
Right.
Gosh, I just was interviewed for a podcast yesterday by a young guy. He says, yeah, me and my romantic partner have decided we're not going to have children. We just think the world's too big a mess, and we don't think we'll ever be able to afford giving them a good life. And so when you reach a place where more and more people are thinking things aren't getting better anymore, that creates this, when that awareness comes over you, it's very disruptive. And that's where paying attention to the nervous system becomes so important, because a lot of us have never once in our life had the feeling that we face problems bigger than we can solve, bigger than we know how to solve. We've had the sense that technology will solve it, AI will solve it, the government will solve it, and some people's religion, God will solve it. And yet when we start to think, hey, we've got some tough stuff to deal with. We're not going to get through this with life getting easier. We're going to have to go through some tough patches. Yeah, that's a new thing to get used to.
It is a new thing to get used to. Yeah. I rent an office at a beautiful church, and our pastor walked in the other day, and she's like, how you doing? Good morning. How are you? And I was like, not good. Not good. It's like, and I do remember when you spoke, you said, when we saw you speak, you said people under about 45, 50, whatever, when they read the book, they have this sense of relief of like, oh, I'm not crazy, right? Like, and when I found your work, I felt that inside of me, because I do have this part of me that is weirdly like intuitive, and really like I'm a positive parenting teacher. I'm like the smiliest person on the planet. I teach people how to have hope, joy, all the things. But like I have this deep intuition about like the darkness of what's happening and the evil and the future. And I'm like, what is this? Yeah. And then when I saw you speak and you said, a lot of people are just like, thank God, there's relief. Let's talk about it. Let's stop brushing it under a rug. And then the older generations had a different experience. And then Brian, please go into those different sections of the book, just so that can kind of maybe guide our conversation a little bit, because each section is very important.
Yeah, so I divided the book into 4 parts. And the first part I call letting go. And this is where we have a set of assumptions. Life, I'll be richer than my parents. We can pump as much oil out of the world, out of the earth as we want, and burn it into the air, and there will be no serious consequences, right? There are beliefs
or
like
use
that.
as many plastic bottles as we want, and it'll just be fine.
And they'll go nowhere, right?
Yeah.
So we have these assumptions, and when we begin to have those assumptions stop making sense, that's the letting go process. It's letting go of assumptions that now we think are illusions. And in some ways, it's a very good thing to get rid of illusions. But being disillusioned is a very painful place to be. Often, before any breakthrough, there is a kind of depressing reckoning with realities that we wish weren't the case. And so that is the letting go phase. And what's happening is, well, like, for example, I've been deeply concerned about climate change for a long time. I think climate change is the tip of a very big, fast melting iceberg. It's not even the biggest problem, but it is the problem that is becoming visible to help us see the deeper problem under the surface. But for a long time, people said, we can't let the temperature of the planet go above 1.5 degrees centigrade. And then we let it go above 1.5. And then they'll say, we can't let it go above 2. And it's very possible in the next couple of years, it will go above 2. And so for people who keep saying, we can't let this happen or we'll really be in trouble, when those things happen, we can't let there be an insurrection to try to take down the Capitol. We can't let these norms of the courts be violated. And then it happens. And that's where we start saying, okay, something deeper is going on. The letting go phase is painful because we all want to fix it. Especially, I'm kind of like you, Wendy. I'm a very cheerful, upbeat person, right? But those of us who work really hard at being cheerful, in some ways, this is the hardest for, because we feel that we're being dishonest if we're excessively cheerful. And we don't want to be dishonest. And to be stuck with saying, if I tell the truth, it's a little scary. And if I don't tell the truth, it feels dishonest. That brings us to a second place I call letting be. And letting be is where we say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to process this. I am out of familiar territory. I'm beyond my coping strategies that I developed at this point in my life. And the letting be phase is very, very difficult, but it's very important. In the recovery world, this is often called hitting bottom. I don't know what to do, but I know that my life has become unmanageable, And what's interesting is if we let that phase do its work on us, we are able to say, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. I don't know how I and we are going to handle this. It's funny that new things come. There's a certain sense that the old paradigms collapse and new things come into view that we never could have seen before. And so that's the letting come phase. And then once enough comes, we feel like, you know what, I've got the tools I need to face this new reality that I didn't want to face before. And that I call the setting free. So letting go, letting be, letting come, setting free. It seems to me a process that happens. And what's unique about what's happening is it's happening to like 1 billion of us right now on the planet, and probably 3 or 4 more billion are going to have that process begin in the next few years. And probably 20 years from now, the majority of people will have gone through something like this process, I suspect.
Yep.
Well, as you described that, I also was just thinking about how you came to know God and how it was like what can be a very complicated it has so many layers to it. The way that you said, I'm going to operate like my compass is just going to be like, I know God is love.
Yeah.
So it's like, it sounds like a similar kind of process where it's like, we have so much information coming at us, whether it's, what science is discovering, what governments are doing, which way everything's going. There's so many layers and so many complexities to it. But then it's a certain point, it's like, okay, now what? Where am I going to operate from today?
Yeah.
Because, at some point, it's like, you can't solve all of those things, or your mind can't wrap itself
Yes.
around how you would even solve all of them. But
Yes,
so then
yes.
it's like, well, how do I simplify it to a point where when I wake up today, where is my heart centered?
Yes.
How can I be on the right side of history? And how can I just look at, the gift of today? Because, and thankfully, I mean, especially like, I look at Wendy and I'm like, you're in a position in a place to affect change, within homes, within families. Your whole world is that. Same with you, Brian. I mean, it's like, what a beautiful place to, center yourself and actually be able to make change today. But yeah, it's almost like the complexities of everything become so overwhelming. You have to like simplify it down to just like, okay, where am I going to operate from?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I love the way you said that. It becomes kind of your operating system. And my operating system is going to be love. It's not going to be revenge. It's not going to be fear. It's not going to be greed. I actually would like to become the most loving version of myself that I can. And the worse the times are, the more important that will be, right? So I think that, in fact, that's a sentence that I wish I would have put in the book. And here's the sentence. I don't know what the future holds, but I know how I want to show up. And I think that's, you get to, I don't know what the future holds in that letting go and letting be process. And then I think you start to figure out, how do I want to show up for whatever's ahead in the letting come and setting free process.
Okay, let's talk real parenting for a moment. If your home sometimes feels more like a war zone than a peaceful sanctuary, and your strong-willed child feels like they're constantly pushing back, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are not a bad parent. You're not broken, and your child is not out to ruin your life. I know. It sure seems like that sometimes, doesn't it? You're exhausted because you're actually trying so hard, but you're using hand-me-down parenting tools that weren't effective back then to get long-term results and aren't effective now. Plus, the fear and force tactics that most of us inherited were never going to work for the beautiful, bold, determined child you've been gifted. That's why I created Thriving with Strong-Willed Kids, a completely free quick start learning bundle that's changing the game for families everywhere. Inside this bundle, I'm going to teach you how to calm power struggles without punishment or threats or yelling. I'm going to help you communicate in ways your child actually responds to, no matter how strong-willed they are, and finally feel empowered and responsive as a parent instead of reactive. Inside the free learning guide and interactive 1-hour workshop, I'll help you flip the script to stop seeing your child as too much and start seeing them as exactly who they're meant to be. Remember, you're not failing. You just haven't been given the right roadmap yet. So you can grab your free bundle and choose your workshop time at freshstartfamilyonline.com/power. Let's rewrite your parenting story together. I love it, Brian, because that process, letting be, letting come, it is, to me, again, like when I look at the nervous system, when you're in like kind of panic mode or
Yes.
denial or suppression,
Yes.
that like prefrontal cortex, that like logical thinking, creative, curious part of our mind, like just can't operate. And so this idea of just like letting yourself settle down into the safety of
Yes.
not knowing. And we know the nervous system, when it feels safe, even though it's bizarro to think like, oh, this is safety. It is like thinking there's no answer, there's no hope. Like, oh my gosh, this is reality. Like this is actually happening. Like right now, most of us are like, authoritarianism is actually taking over our nation. Like when you can just settle into the like safety of acceptance, there's something really odd, I think, that happens in the body then that opens up your ability to show up in a way, and like you start to get those answers, right? Like I always think of our bodies as like we're like conduits of light, right? And like to be able to receive that divine guidance, like you got to have this clear channel. And if there's suppression and blame and denial, and like we'll talk about anger in a little bit, anger, whatever, then it just doesn't flow. And speaking of the letting go part, and that section really was so difficult for me. I found myself just wanting to like get through it, you know, and get to the next chapters. I might have like actually breezed through that section probably too fast. But I remember I had the honor of seeing Yvon Chouinard speak. He's the founder of Patagonia.
Yes.
Back when I was really young. I was like 20, probably 25, maybe 25 years old. And I saw him speak in the backyard of it was gorgeous on the ocean, La Jolla, California. And I'll never forget, it was kind of one of those moments where he just looked at us, and he was this big group as the company I worked at the time. And he was like, basically, hey, so y'all know we're fucked. And I don't remember if that was exactly his words. So sorry, Yvon, if that's not your language. But it was essentially the message of like, just so you know, it's too late. It is too late. We are past the point of saving this planet. And it was such a like, he's just kind of an intense person, right? And I was so young, and I just remember being like, whoa, this can't be true. This can't be true. No. We can save it. We can avoid. And he was just very, very clear that like we are past the point of no return. And that's the biggest thing that I remember about his speech that day. But of course, you see him lead Patagonia in ways that they still care. They still show up in a way where they're like, we're going to source the stuff correctly. We're going to make sure we are respecting the places where we get our fabrics and the way, you know, our business is done. But it just reminds me of that. He's been very honest from the beginning with the wisdom and expertise that he has, that we are, as you would call it, ecological overshoot. Is that the word that you use, Brian?
That's right. That's right. Yes.
That it is, we're knee deep in it. And yeah, it's just wild. So, okay. So we understand this kind of 4-step process of like approaching this idea of life after doom and still being able to show up in a way where we are finding joy and still walking the walk of love, right? Like not just like, because some days I look at Terry and our little girl is going to go to college in a year in Los Angeles for 4 years. So we've got to be here for a while. But some days I'm like, honey, should we just move to Ireland, or should we just, but even then, you know, you're not escaping the world's problems, but America is so heavy right now. But you have this kind of system set up for us to be able to show up and still do life. And let's kind of shift now into like these 2 main sections that I see you talk about a lot. One is the ecological overshoot, and then another one is like this authoritarianism that we are really standing tall against. And what would you say about each of those as far as like, you know, not putting our head in the sand, but yet still kind of showing up in a way where we are actually getting up and taking the steps forward? Because I think a lot of people in America right now are just frozen. They're just frozen. And we have the rise, the authoritarian playbook is the rise of threats against anybody who uses their voice, speaks out. And so you start to become scared. I mean, I know the day of the peaceful protest here, you know, I couldn't sleep. There was nightmares. And then, you know, the day of, you're just like, wow, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever been a part of. But that 4 hours leading up to it, you're just thinking about the threats and this authoritarianism that's taking over. So what would you say, like, let's start with the ecological overshoot, and we know it's all connected, right? Like we know any type of abuse of power, whether it's, you know, authoritarianism or the ecological overshoot, is not what we want to partake in, but we are partaking in it. So what would you say there, Brian?
Sure. Well, first, I'm glad you focus on this, because it's really it's one of those concepts that once you understand it, it's very simple and very far-reaching. If you think of ecological overshoot, it has to do with our relationship to the earth. And if what we do is we take out from the earth more resources than the earth can replenish, and if we pump into the earth more wastes and toxins and pollution than the earth can detoxify. Then what that means is every generation inherits an earth that's poorer than the previous generation. And that's the simple idea. We make the earth poorer. Now, people who study this sort of thing often talk about tipping points, because you can do a little bit of damage to the earth for a very long time, and then suddenly you find out that damage now catches up with you. You seem to be getting away with it. I remember when I was a college teacher, I had a student come to see me once. He said, "Oh, Mr. McLaren, I really need your help. I don't know who to talk to. You're the only professor who knows my name," because it was a big university with big classes. And he said, "Look, I've really been stupid. I've been snorting cocaine every day since I got here." And he said, "I've been getting cash advances from my dad's credit card." So you think,
wow,
here's a human being who was doing some things that were going to have consequences, but he got away with it for several weeks. He overshot.
That's a great example.
Big overshot.
Exactly right. And so
I love that he came to you.
That's right.
You had this aura of safety for a long time, I'm sure. That's amazing.
Yeah. So we're in that situation with the earth. And here's what that means then. It means that every year the temperature is going to get a little warmer on average, right? There might be 1 or 2 years that are anomalies just for other reasons, but the general trend is unmistakably the earth is getting hotter. When the earth gets hotter, it gets wetter. When it's hotter and wetter, there are more storms and droughts because the weather patterns change. There are more fires. There are more dead coral reefs. There are more, the crop failures. So ecological overshoot happens when we human beings push the earth beyond its capacity to keep rebounding from the last tragedy or catastrophe that it suffered. But here's how that relates to authoritarianism. And Wendy, you're very insightful for connecting them. When people are under stress, sooner or later, their stress levels become high enough that they want to find some confident person who will promise them to fix everything. And if that
blame,
And there are certain people who are not really interested in the common good. They're only interested in their own power, money, and pleasure. We call those sociopathic people. They don't have any sense of concern for other people. And our culture breeds, our culture shapes a lot of people to be sociopathic. And there are certain people who, when they see the anxiety growing among people, the economy isn't working as well as it used to. Well, of course not, because the ecology that it depends on has been pushed to its limits. Then these people say, I can make big promises, or I can give them somebody to blame, and then they amass huge amounts of money and power. And this is an old story, happens again and again and again. And
then they turn on each other.
Yeah.
And then you are the saving grace amongst a citizenship of mayhem.
Yeah. I remember years ago when I first started getting more involved in politics, like a lot of people, when my kids were small, we had 4 kids in 6 years. We were changing a lot of diapers and going to a lot of soccer games.
Amazing.
And then paying a lot of college tuitions, right? So
That seems like a world record. 4 kids in 6 years?
Yeah, a lot of people have beat it, but we did pretty well. Yeah. But, I wasn't thinking about the climate, and I wasn't thinking about ecological overshoot, except in the back of my mind, but I was very busy. But you get older and you start thinking about the well-being of your children and the well-being of your grandchildren and beyond. You start being less worried about yourself and more worried about the future. And when that happens, you say, okay, if ecological overshoot happens, authoritarianism will be close behind. And that's certainly what is happening. Yeah.
Dang, that is so incredible. Yeah, I mean, we're here in California, so we've just seen it play out so exactly like you're talking about, right? Like we had these devastating fires. We know many people who lost their homes, and we watched how certain people would go down in the authoritarianism spin on it and just would not even, like, they just were not able to look at the ecological overshoot of the situation. And someone with, big words comes in and exactly like you say, promises the solution. It's all this person's fault. And, it's so much, it's like, it feels like it's so much easier for people to fall into like the blame and the vicious cycle of not taking any responsibility, or this idea of acceptance, this letting go of like, oh shit. But we saw that play out, right? And we saw people turn on each other, and then we're still in it where the authoritarian ruler of the nation consistently refers to our governor as scum. That becomes normalized. And then you just have like, it seems like the fall of humanity is like happening right in front of us. So how do you stay in a place of compassion with that, Brian? Because like, I think, again, it's such an interesting season of life where I think the faith that we've built our lives on is based on humility and justice and inclusion and serving others, and we're starting to live more and more. And again, it's like, we know it's like a tale as old as time. It's not the first time it's happened. It's definitely not in America. We have a very dark history. We have a dark history of the world, but it's just wild to watch so many people get taken down and get sucked into this vortex of like authoritarianism and also like the Christian nationalism world. How do you stay compassionate? Because man, even as an emotional literacy teacher and someone who has like been knee deep in learning to have empathy and how that plays out, and even how to process the emotion of anger and the beauty of anger, it's where justice is born, and it's a spotlight emotion, and it's all good. But man, it feels like rage and like hatred is like growing in my heart. And that's just a real honest statement, because I know people are feeling that. And it's like, especially as Christians, we're just like, whoa, 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 we don't want this. How do you stay compassionate? Because it's infuriating, the hypocrisy and the hijacking of a faith that is like, dude, Jesus has gotta be like, what is happening? How do you stay compassionate? Please give us the magic pill.
Yes. Oh my, that's right. We can sort of imagine God walking around saying, "Oh, myself, what are these people doing now?" But
right.
I mean, there's so much, and obviously, as you know, as I worked through this process myself, the little phrases that I was saying, I need to hold on to this, each of those became a chapter title in the book. And so I feel like there are a number of small practices that we can put together that actually help give us a fabric, a woven fabric, to get through a lot of what we're struggling with. But specifically to your question about anger and compassion, and I think it's very good to link those two. First, the anger, as you said, is really, really important. And even though I'm not I don't think it shows, but I'm furious. I have so much anger inside of me. But what's happened to me is I've stopped seeing this as individuals, and I've started to see it as systems.
A system, exactly.
And,
that does
and
help.
I think when we shift, so I look at Donald Trump, and in one way, I think he's, I'll give you an example. My son is an entrepreneur. He started a very successful computer information systems business, and one of his top clients was USAID. So my son went from owning a very valuable business to a business that was gutted by Elon Musk and Donald Trump in the last 6 months. Like, this business was doing great, and then suddenly something that was stupid and ham-fisted and So And I'm watching my son, and he's got an incredible patience and maturity in it, more than I have, I think. But I feel anger, right? And I look at where I live. I've lived here in Southwest Florida for 17 years, 16 years. And in these years, the number of beautiful wild places that have been bulldozed and turned into parking lots and strip malls, I just think we don't need more strip malls. But but somebody wants money. And oh my goodness. See, the number of things that make me angry. But here's what I come to realize. Oh, I'm angry because something or someone that I love is being harmed. My anger is actually a fruit of my love. If I didn't care, if I didn't have love, so then I focus on the love and I say, well, I love these things, these people, and these places. And I'm angry because they're being destroyed. Why are they being destroyed? And then I can focus on an individual. But then I realize there are so many of these individuals. And if you got rid of that one, somebody else would step into his place. And then I start to have to say, the problem is a system. And the system leads people to do harm. And they don't even realize it. In fact, they often think they're doing good while they're doing harm. You know, it's interesting. There's a scene in the Gospels where the Pharisees, who are sort of the religious elite in Jesus' time, look out at a bunch of people who are following Jesus, coming to hear him speak, and they say, this damned crowd that doesn't know the law. They say, a curse be on them, which is the way of saying, damned this crowd that doesn't know the law, right? And then Jesus looks at the crowd and says, they're like sheep without a shepherd. In other words, when somebody comes along who really does care about them, of course they're going to come to me because so many other people are abusing them and making false promises to them and so on. And so he doesn't personalize. He sees the system that's at work. That helps me. That helps me. But it then takes me even deeper in that journey from letting go to letting be. Because when I say the systems are a problem, systems that give rich people, you know, one rich person might have the power of, 50 million poor people, maybe way more than that, right? You think, how do we ever deal with that system? And here's when a book like Life After Doom that scares people actually can be a source of hope. Because you might say, if this system were to collapse, what would come on the other side? Could be something better, could be something worse. If it could be something better, what's keeping the better from happening? The current system, because the people who are making money from the current system keep it going. And so then you step back and you see, oh, this is how things change. Change happens when systems deteriorate and collapse and lose their power. And then that's when new things become possible. And it's scary and it's dangerous and it's chaotic, but that seems to be the pattern, and it's the pattern Christians should be familiar with. It's the pattern of death, burial, and resurrection. Something has to end for something new to begin.
So true. It's wild because 2 times I've seen that spoken about a little bit. We have an intuitive friend who's incredibly insightful and seems to always know what's going to happen. And she just keeps saying, I keep saying, oh my gosh, is there going to be a civil war? Like, are we going to be okay? Is this the end? Right. And she just keeps saying, you got to trust me, love wins. And the collapse of the white supremacy system is happening. And then another author, her name's Erin Moon. I love her work so much. She was on our show a few months ago. But she wrote something in her book about like how, maybe you'll know this from like your pastoral knowledge, but like every certain amount of years, there's been like a collapse of the Christian, like awful systems and then a rebirth of something new. And her book just came out this last year and she was saying, we're right about that time. And I forget if it was whatever, every X amount of years this happens. And I remember saving that page and being like, this gives me some hope because you can feel that in the nation right now. There seems to be this light that's being shed finally, where people are really finally realizing, oh, this is a effed up system. This is not Christ-like. And it does feel there's a certain element that is imploding,
yes,
so to speak.
Yes.
So that gives me hope.
and you know, I'm thinking about parents too, because then if parents understand this in one way, when we're parents of young children, especially, we're in the nesting phase of life. We want everything to be quiet and safe to raise our babies, right? That's understandable. Yeah. And it's amazing how parents in terrible situations can create a relatively safe nest for their kids compared to the chaos that's happening outside.
Yeah.
But then comes the next phase of parenting, where we have to prepare our kids for how they want to show up in the world and what they want to do. And this, to me, is something that will become more and more important for parents to think about, is they can think about how, like, do I want to teach my kids, make the most money that you can, whatever the cost? Because if I teach my kids that, they could end up getting employed by some people who would want them to do some horrible, horrible things and pay them very, very well for it. Yeah. And then I think, well, what do I want my kids to do? And so then you think a parent can then say, my job is to help prepare my kids to live the best life they can, no matter what happens. And when we have that framework, in a sense, we've lost the ability to trust that the system itself will give them a bunch of safe options. The system will give them some very dangerous options. And it's going to be our job and their job to try to find some better options as they learn to make their way in the world that's going to be going through the changes that we probably can't even imagine right now. So, yeah.
Yes, it's so true. And as we're talking about, like, as you speak, especially to the parents who I think are finding courage always, every day, to really step outside of the norm that they're seeing, to raise their voice, to advocate, to have the uncomfortable conversations with their in-laws, their neighbors, to dispel lies and truth and just stand tall for love, let's say. Yeah. Holy smokes, it just takes so much courage. And especially when you start to have the rise of authoritarianism in a nation where people are getting murdered and the sitting president is threatening big force against anyone who speaks out against him. But Brian, I know you told a story when we saw you speak at the kids' preschool about the time when you got called in to, was it I think it was like a white supremacy event in, was it Raleigh, North Carolina?
Yeah.
Would you tell us that story and like what was going through your mind when you got called in for, I think you got called in for pastoral support to be a presence there of light, and just maybe finish us off this episode with like, how can we find the courage to still show up and walk that walk of love and do our work and you know, we're doing this work, right? We're a podcaster, we're educators, we're all the things, but the people listening, they're doing the work in their home every day when they choose to raise their children without an authoritarian leadership system, with, a firm and kind democratic system. They're doing the work when they have the conversations with their neighbors with compassion instead of judgment and disgust. Like there's a million different ways to walk the walk of love right now, but it takes so much freaking courage. Yeah. So if you could share that story with us and just share any advice or tips you have on how to keep showing up with courage.
Yes.
In the name of Jesus.
Well, yeah, in 2017, I got a call from a couple. I think I introduced them and then they got married. So, and they both became clergy. And they called me, and in fact, I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and they said, "Hey, Brian, you may not have heard this, but they lived in Charlottesville, Virginia." And they said, "You may not have heard this, but there's been a lot of Ku Klux Klan rallies and these other white supremacist groups. They're planning a civil war, and they want the new capital of the Confederacy to be Charlottesville, Virginia. And so there's going to be this big event later this summer, and there's going to be a lot of white supremacist groups there. And we've been trying to organize the clergy of our town and invite clergy in from other places to help us have a presence that's an alternative to the message of hate and white supremacy that's going to be pervade there. And they said, we've had great success in having clergy of color come, and we've had great success in getting white women clergy to come. We're having real trouble getting white male clergy to come. And
Wow.
and they said,
Interesting.
you know, we know you live a long way away, but is there any chance you'd come and help us and be part of a clergy presence and kind of counter protest to what they'll be doing? So
Dang.
I said, well, like any good Christian, I said, well, let me ask my wife. And and she said, if you get killed, don't come home.
I'm gonna kill you if you get killed.
That's right. And so I went that weekend. It was called the Unite the Right rally. And all I can say is I never thought in my lifetime I would see people walking down the streets of an American city carrying Nazi flags, chanting Nazi slogans. It was just amazing and shocking and horrifying. But as clergy, we were deployed to different areas, and they created little safe zones because there was a lot of violence.
Surprise, surprise.
And so there we were. You know, and that day I wore my clergy collar and a stole. So they wanted us to stand out so people would see we're there to help if we can. And I was there later in the day. When a woman was killed by a violent guy who's part of this. He ran over several people, and a group of us were just standing up the hill, and somebody came running up and said, "Hey, we need you guys down here. We need you guys." And so we went running down, and we were there before the first responders, where people were on the ground, and it was chaos. But we were there, and we were helping people as we could, and calming people as we could, and just sitting with people where we could. So many people came up to us, said, "Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here." And so I think we were able to just say, look, there are some people here who believe in peace and want to work for peace. And that was an important presence. And I think that's, in many ways, that's the one gift that we can always bring. We can bring the gift of a centered presence of people who know how they want to show up. We don't want to show up with hate. We want to show up with love. We don't want to show up with panic. We want to show up with calm and presence and confidence. And that's our challenge, I think. Should we choose to accept it?
And how did that... And was there a memory of, like, you know, knowing that crew, obviously a great representation of authoritarian leadership? Yeah. Do you remember how your fear, or like finding the courage to go forward, even though there was a chance of harm, right? Like that is such a wild concept for most of us. And that same fear gets you ignited when your father-in-law texts you something snarky, or you are like, hey, I'm going to show up to a peaceful protest and I'm concerned someone might mow us down in a fast vehicle, like whatever it is. It's the same nervous system. Did you have that in that moment? Like, is there anything that you just tell yourself that's like, I don't know, more important to do X, Y, and Z than to, I don't know, like what did you tell yourself in that moment and every day that you walk this walk?
I mean, obviously I was nervous getting there. I arrived, my plane was late. And so I arrived the night before when there was a prayer service that I was supposed to be leading a prayer in. So I was rushing across. It was hard to find parking. I was rushing across the campus, and I see these gangs of guys running around with baseball bats. And I thought, okay, something's going on. And when that night ended, the prayer service ended, they came and said, you can't leave. There's gangs of people going around, and it's not safe to go out. So we were sort of detained inside the church. And then the next day, going out in the street, I've never seen so many guns and people, arrogant young white men looking for a fight. And and then in the days after, I was given access to the sort of secret communications that the Unite the Right white supremacists were using a video game platform to communicate with each other. And there were informants who then gave some of us access to what they were saying. So you just realize these are mean people.
Wow.
They want to have a war. They want there to be violence. And so
Yep.
that was, I lost some of my illusions. I had to let go of the illusion that sort of thing would never happen.
Yes.
But here's the thing. Our nervous system, if we treat it well, if we know how to take care of it, it has the ability to get used to new realities. And so the years since then, I have known the reality that was there more than I did before. And that helps me devise a better strategy for response. So I think, and that's a process
true.
that it'll keep changing in the years ahead. But I think as long as we get used to saying, this is the process we're in, let's try to show up as best we can. That's a good thing.
Yeah. And there's going to be danger no matter what, no matter if you face it now or if you just become permissive and let a system of authoritarianism or ecological overshoot unroll or roll out, there's going to be danger. So I love that idea of just knowing, like, signaling safety. There's going to, like, this is part of humanity. This is part of being human. This is not something we're just going to brush under a rug. We're going to step forward and get out of bed and do the work.
Exactly.
You talk about taking care of your nervous system. How do you, or what are some ways that you take care of your nervous system?
Yes. And I should say, I have to jump off in just a couple minutes,
Okay.
but
Yep.
Yeah.
We got you. Yeah.
The two things that help me the most, actually the three things that help me the most. First is I get outdoors and I take a walk, and my
Yep.
prayers happen outdoors among the trees and the sky and the weather, things that are bigger than human beings and vaster than human beings. And that helps me a great deal. Second, I have contemplative practices. Like I know how to be still and let things calm down. And I know how to breathe deeply and let my body recollect itself. I'm so glad I learned those kinds of practices. And third, the thing that helps me is creativity, to try to do something beautiful and constructive, whether it's writing a book or having a podcast like you do, or volunteering somewhere. To do something creative and constructive helps.
Well, that's perfect. I think that's the best way we could have wrapped this up. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We just want to wrap up by asking, where can listeners find you? And we heard there's something about maybe a new book coming in July.
A creative book,
Yeah.
which I
That's
can't wait
right.
to dig into. Tell us more.
So my website's brianmclaren.net, and there's links to my social media and podcast I do and other things I do. So brianmclaren.net. And the same ground that I grappled with in Life After Doom, I've been working with in a trilogy of novels, and the first comes out in July. It's called The Last Voyage, and it's a science fiction story that I think people will enjoy.
Amazing.
I'm going to get that for us so we can have a fiction. We're going to Mexico for Terry's 50th birthday. So I wanted to find a fiction. It's kind of like sci-fi is like kind of fiction, but kind of not, right? I have a feeling.
No, it's fiction. It's character driven, plot driven, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Very cool.
So good.
Well, thank you so much. Have a great day, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Brian.
to be
We
with
so
you.
appreciate you.
Hooray! You made it to the end of a Fresh Start Family Show episode. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a quick second, make sure you hit subscribe to our show so you can be updated when our new episodes drop. I will see you back soon for the next episode.
If you are tired of the yelling, the guilt, and the feeling like you're failing as a parent, especially with your strong-willed child, please hear me. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with your kiddo. Strong-willed kids aren't broken or problem kids who need their wills broken. They're brave, they're spirited, they're here to teach us something powerful. I know myself because I've been raising one for 17 years and she has completely, positively transformed my life. Thanks to this work that has empowered me to see her in an accurate, truthful lens. I'd love to show you how to thrive with your strong-willed kid too, starting now. You can grab my free Quick Start Learning Bundle and choose a time for the interactive workshop at freshstartfamilyonline.com/power. You are not alone and you don't have to figure this out on your own anymore. I'll see you inside your free learning guide and at class very soon.